This is My Favorite DJ, the podcast, and you are now listening to what is soon to be the number one DJ podcast on iTunes. If you find this podcast enjoyable, if it's giving you some knowledge you didn't have before, if you enjoy the interviews with the DJs that I've had on here so far, obviously there are a lot more DJs to come. If you enjoy any aspect of what you're listening to right now on the podcast app, please rate it 5 stars. My goal is to have this podcast be the number one DJ podcast by iTunes rating, and you can help. All you have to do is hit 5 stars, maybe leave a comment if you want, and I greatly appreciate it. Also this week, I thought to myself, with all the support that well, yeah, I guess it's a community. With all the support we've been getting, I would love to do a little bit in return. I have some swag packs that I'm going to be posting up on my Instagram. So they're going to be like book bags and like Wi-Fi, not Wi-Fi, but rather Bluetooth speakers, the little camera blocker for your laptop, an ID holder that you tape to the back of the phone, just a bunch of stuff. I'm going to give out a bunch of stuff. So if you don't follow me on Instagram, you should do so now. My Favorite DJ is the account, and I will be posting up a picture of all the stuff that you can potentially get for free for just listening to the podcast or following me on Instagram. And there will be some instructions there on how to do that. Also, if you enjoy this podcast today, you should screenshot it and send me a message saying that you listened to it, or post it on your Instagram stories or on Twitter, and I'll follow anyone that does so. So I can be directly reached by anyone that has any questions via messages, or if you guys want to communicate via social media, just post a screenshot of you listening to this podcast to your Instagram stories or your Twitter page, or just message it to me and I will follow you back. I want to give a shout out to everybody that attempted to guess who today's guest is on my last Instagram post, and I don't think that there was a single winner. Definitely want to give DJ Obscene a shout out because he guessed Paris Hilton, and even though I have DJed with Paris Hilton before, she is not the guest today. Actually, an interesting story about Paris Hilton. I worked with her for a New Year's Eve party in Vegas, and she was there with her family. So like the Hiltons, like the people that own or have their name on major hotel chains. She was scheduled to do, I think, maybe an hour, at most 90 minutes. And it wasn't bad. And here's what I will say about Paris Hilton, which I actually, for everything that we real DJs give celebrity DJs that really try to DJ, she was really trying. First of all, she was attempting to do what we do, and it was not bad. But the part that impressed me the most was when her mom and dad and her sister were like, yo, let's book it, let's get out of here, and like sending her messages from the dance floor, like just like waving their hands like let's go, and like pointing at their clocks and shit. She was like, hold up, like I have some more songs I want to play. So to me, when I saw that, I was like, oh, like you're not in this for the paycheck or just for like the fame, because it was the end of her set and like the shine had kind of worn off at that point. So yeah, you get to see a celebrity DJ and it's fantastic and everyone's staring at you. And depending on the celebrity DJ, towards the end of the set, people will be like uninterested. It depends on how well they do. And she wasn't doing a bad job, but it's a New Year's Eve and it's a difficult room to hold. So she didn't have as much attention on her as the start of her set. And she still wanted to play a couple of records, even though her family wanted to leave. So I respect Paris Hilton, maybe not to obviously the level that I would respect any open format DJ, because celebrity DJs are in their own category. But the fact that she wanted to stay, and she did stay and played a couple of extra records when her family was like, yo, let's book it, showed me at least that she cared about what she was doing. And to me, that was important. So DJ Obscene, it is not Paris Hilton, but that is my Paris Hilton story for the evening. Today's guest is somebody that kind of pioneered the traveling DJ idea in the United States. Was one of the pioneers, rather, I should say. One of the masterminds of a handful of individuals that basically sold the idea to nightclubs that you should have out-of-town DJs come into your spot and work. This was probably very, very, very rare prior to what he helped put together. He had a DJ management company for a while, but it was kind of like self-serving and at the same time helping other DJs, because he was a DJ in the actual management company and was also taking care of bookings for other DJs. He plays at EDC, the Electric Daisy Carnivals, in the probably the tent that I would want to go into, the Funk tent, I believe. And he's one of my good friends, somebody that I've enjoyed since the minute that I've met him, because he's an all-around good dude and a fantastic disc jock, as he would say it. Today's guest is Graham Funke, and it's not Graham Funk, and that's one of the first things that we talk about, but I am going to split this episode up into two parts because it is a lot of content and it's all fantastic. Jesus, it is so great to speak to somebody that has the years of knowledge that Graham does. It's absolutely fantastic, and a lot of the questions that I was asking were to maybe help some people that would have the same questions, but really I was just using it as an opportunity to pick his brain for every little piece of knowledge that I might not have already acquired in the space. And Graham is somebody that I highly respect as a DJ colleague and admire as a human, because he is top-notch all the way around. I would read questions at the end of the episode, but unfortunately my inbox is empty. I think I've done something like 50 plus questions at this point over the course of maybe 14 or 15 podcasts, but I have no questions to read. So unfortunately, there will be no questions read at the end of this podcast. If you have a question I would love to answer, just email myfavoritepodcast@gmail.com and I will get the answer to you as best as I can, as fast as I can. I appreciate any and all questions about anything, really. I don't really care what it is at this point. I guess I've answered enough DJ questions. If you have questions about other shit that I might be able to help with, send it on over. I'll do my best. So without further ado, today's guest on the podcast, my favorite DJ, Graham Funke. This is part 1, and part 2 will be released maybe at the end of this week, potentially the beginning of next week. Thank you for listening, and here we go. Now we're live.
Testing.
Fantastic.
1, 2, 3.
I hear you great, and I know that we're in a nice part of town because I saw G-Wagons pulling left turns over double yellow lines while the police was waving at them down the street. So I know.
You've seen Beverly Hills Cop. You know how it operates here. It's a separate entity from LAPD. In fact, when I had a break-in in a car recently, the way the police had addressed that issue, like a CSI truck, they tested for prints and stuff, which I had never experienced in all my dealings with police over the course of my entire life. For a break-in in a car that stole a couple things, like they're literally like the CSI unit shows up. So that's what you're dealing with here once you move into the 90210, 90212 area code. I come here for quiet.
Fantastic.
I did Hollywood long enough.
I love your house.
Thanks.
Walking in here, it definitely has like a really cool feeling to it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. This is My Favorite DJ, and today my favorite DJ is Graham. And I want you to say your last name or your DJ moniker specifically for people that think it's funk or funky, people that might not know of you specifically. Let's just, from the horse's mouth, hear the pronunciation of your name.
It is a German last name. The German word being Funke. My family has pronounced it funky all these years. Though when I was younger, I had a moniker like everybody else. I was known as white folks, and there are people who still refer to me as white folks that I bump into. But in order to do the various things that I like to do besides DJing, I felt that at some point I'll use my real name, Graham Funke, and that's what it is.
Fantastic. I was breaking my brain over what would be the best sort of like line of questioning for you. I realized that eventually it's just going to end up being a conversation because we get along pretty well.
Yeah, so we known each other quite a while.
It's been probably over a decade at this point. But I don't want to go into Genesis and how you started, because that kind of stuff is cool, but I think it's just like been overdone. Like, besides just shooting the shit and hanging out with a buddy of mine,
Yeah.
who, to be honest with you, I don't have a lot of DJ friends that I would consider like friends, you know? But your demeanor has always been so social and so nice, so polite. And we were kind of talking about a couple of things before we hit the record button. But do you think that the way that you've carried yourself throughout all these years has helped your longevity to like still be active? Because you've had a long career if you look at the average lifespan of a DJ career. Do you think that that's part of it?
I mean, it's tough to assess from my own perspective if that's true or not, because, you know, especially in nightlife, you're going to have people who put on a face in terms of how they deal with you, and you can't really get a read on if they like you or not, or if they're tolerating you, or if they are forced to tolerate you, you know. But coming from where I come from in DJing, where it was a very small circle of people, and I watched it slowly get bigger and then explode, really. It doesn't service anybody not to be nice. And I can point out a ton of people who have not operated like that. And you've seen a lot fall by the wayside, and I see a lot of people get painted poorly. So I just try and keep it moving, and if there's someone that rubs me wrong, I'll try not to lose sleep over it. And just like you said, there are people that I consider friends in nightlife that once I hang it up, if we ever hang it up, once I hang it up, I'll still be friends with them. If I go to certain cities, that's who I'm going to call and hang out with, you know. So it's not some effort on my part, like, let me be nice to make sure I'm not rubbing someone the wrong way. Let me be nice to make sure I can still get something from somebody. I don't operate like that. I just kind of like go do me. Mm. And I try and offer a solid set. I mean, anytime I go into a club, I tell, you know, the operator, I go, listen, you're going to get 100% from me, whether there's 5 people here or 5,000 people here. You know, I'm not going to, that's what the job is, right?
Right.
Creating a dialogue with whoever's there, however many people it is. And so I never half step on that.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that you speak to operators prior to playing. Is that like a normal thing that you do?
There have been DJs and continue to be DJs who are, I call them the 5 minutes before DJ, mm-hmm. who they're there to get a check maybe or whatever, and I never show up 5 minutes before.
Right.
And that's not just showing solidarity with the night, right? That's also, I want to get a feel for the room, even if I've played there many times, see what's happening in there, chop it up with whoever's playing with me that night. So I go get the lay of the land, and that involves talking to the operators too, you know. I think it's important to let them know, because there's a lot of misconceptions in nightlife. It's important to let them know, if you need something, let me know. Let's work together. We have the same goal here. You need a successful night. I need to justify my paycheck. So that involves, you know, talking to operators, some of which are not available. You know what I mean? It's not like you get to walk in and always shoot, you know, chop it up with who's running the place.
But there will usually be a manager around. That you
yeah,
can, like...
and it's important, like I said, it's important to socialize with, not socialize really, but, you know, converse with them.
At least open up a channel of dialogue.
Yeah, get on the same page.
Right.
For the night.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, and that's something that I do on a regular basis, including if there's a new club that has a lot of high-end, quote-unquote, like big bottle poppers. I will immediately let it be known that I have no problem catering to the person spending 15 grand.
What are you there for?
For a bottle of alcohol. Yeah. So if there's ever a song that needs to be played, or they want a specific shout out or anything like that, it's like, if the club is successful for 6 months, that means I have 6 months of a residency. So why wouldn't I want to make sure that everything goes according to plan? Now, the question with that is, do you feel that it's quote unquote selling out or being a whore playing music that might be asked of you?
You know, that's a bigger question in terms of the anthropology of DJing, where, you know, early in the evolution of DJing, there was a component where people come to see what you're going to do, right? People didn't have access to whatever song they wanted, anytime they wanted, as many times as they wanted, you know, like it is now. So there was that aspect of, we like that DJ because when we go see him, we like what he does. and the crowd takes their cue from the DJ. And as the years have progressed, you see less of that because there's access. So now the DJ needs to take, not 100%, but there's an aspect to the DJ needing to take their cues from the crowd as well. So it's not selling out to give the crowd what they want. You're all there to win, right? So you need to make sure that you preserve whatever it is that makes you you when you go DJ, when you go perform, but using what I call the weapons of mass destruction, meaning like the big hits. There's nothing. What's the downside?
Right.
You know, it's their tools.
I
That's
agree.
what you're there for.
The way that I have described it to some people, because I've had quote unquote cool people come visit me, people that can't be bothered with going out to nightclubs and such. And they would ask me, I specifically remember one of my friends when I was playing like Holla Back Girl, when this was like the song, she asked me like, why are you playing this shit? And I felt, first of all, attacked for a second, but it was the first instance where my mouth just moved and my thoughts just went off, and I was like, I play shitty music in cool ways. Like, that's all I could come up with at that moment.
My catchphrase has always been, I play bad music well. I've said this a million times. That's what I do, you know? Not that it's all bad.
Right.
But
what is, and then again, it's like, what is bad? What is bad music, right?
It's subjective.
Of course.
Food is, movies,
of course.
Music.
Yeah. So what I think, this is something we might share in regards to feeling. I've never been an educator. Like, maybe there's a song that I think people should know about, but I'm not there to educate. I feel like I'm more there to entertain. And I
agree with you.
I feel like my job is move the dance floor, keep people happy, create moments throughout the night that might be dope. But beyond that, it's like if I wanted to play what I wanted to play, I could easily do that. But I just lock my bedroom door.
And I think that there is a certain element of people who get into nightlife, especially, you know, in this current time, where they think that's what they're coming to do. I'm going to come express my taste to you. And I feel like that tends to be celebrities who get into DJing, you know, thinking that's what it is. Like, they'll come see me and then they'll be into, I'm going to share this music with them. And it's just not it, you know what I mean?
Right.
I always say that DJing is philosophy and science. The science aspect of it being the technical skill set and knowing not just what to play, but when to play it to maximize the reaction, right? But the philosophy is it's mob mentality, right? It's crowd control.
That's what it is. I always say it's like psychology. I'm a psychologist from afar.
Right. So anybody who starts tomorrow, if they don't grasp those two components, they're never going to get it. You know, you have to be aware of these things.
At least on a high level.
Yeah, and I don't think it's you subscribe to it by being aware. It's a craft. It really is a craft. And you get there with experience. You learn how to deal with a crowd by playing in front of a crowd. So there's this, you know, there's a disconnect with many people who start, and I'm not discouraging anybody from starting. I'm just saying that in these times when they're going to put someone who's never played in front of people before in a big club just because, it's like, yeah, you better have what I call a grinder. I'm a grinder, you're a grinder, right, on retainer to save the room, you know. And
or janitor, if
time and time again, right, you know. But again, this is the man behind the curtain stuff. I mean,
right? No, but this is, I think, what people need. The whole purpose of this podcast, which has had incredible reception, by the way. At this point, I'm over 30,000 downloads, which
crazy.
If each one is an hour long, that's 30,000 hours
of
content, like, into people's brains, which I think is fantastic. And I feel like this is important for me because I don't want to just take from the space. Like, I want to leave something behind. Whether it just be one dude that's like, I'm just gonna follow this blueprint a little bit, and you know, my girl was like, don't give away the secret sauce. I'm like, you can give away 100% of it, and write it down and laminate it and pass it out. It's like, the thing is, people have to actually do it.
Yeah.
And like, that's hard. How do you still find motivation to continuously push forward? I mean, you've had a relative, I would not say relatively, you've had a successful DJ career, I think, by anybody's standards.
I'm still here.
and you're still here, right? So you're still pushing. So how do you find motivation? Because your road habits are particularly savage, even for me. Like sometimes, and this is something that I'm going to cover in a future podcast, I believe, which is like what kind of deals you could work out with nightclubs. You know, some nightclubs will offer you your rate plus a hotel plus flight plus ground transportation, or they'll offer you just get here and this is what you get paid. You know, there's and everything in between.
Right.
But when you're not afforded a hotel, sometimes you will fly in late night, go straight to the club, play, and then when you're done, kind of go hang out at the airport lounge. And this is like.
A couple things. First off, there was a culture in the past where the venues would cover all these things, you know, and that still exists for, you know, high tier DJs, top tier DJs,
and
right?
even sometimes for us. But
of course, there's elements, but it used to be more. That used to be like more prominent.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And I think the clubs realized that there's too many variables. You know, they have a bottom line just like everybody else. So they say, okay, well, let's up the landed fee, you know, meaning the all-in fee, and you figure it out. So that gives you, sometimes it's a benefit, sometimes it's detrimental to it. Benefit being you can use points, you can not have a hotel, you can stay with a friend. There's ways for you to put that money right into your pocket, right? On the flip side, you know, you might end up in a city that has an event, and suddenly the hotel that you might need, it cuts into your bottom line, right? So it's not always like that. But for me, it's not so much let me save a buck. A lot of times when you look at all the things that have to transpire in getting to a city and going to do the gig, maybe cut out some of the fat. So if I land at 7 p.m. someplace, right, and I'm going to be at the club at 10 p.m., and then I'm off at 3 a.m. after I, you know, debrief with my folks at the club. And I've got a 6 a.m. flight. So how much time you spend in the hotel? In addition to the very small amount of time you spend in the hotel, getting the Uber from the airport to the hotel, then the Uber from the hotel to the club, and then the Uber from the club back to the hotel. It's just like cut out these extra parts. So it's not like you can just start doing that. I've had people come on the road with me who are not DJs and go, I don't know, after a day and a half, they're like I'm done, right? But for me, it's conditioning.
Right.
And I've also, over the course of, you know, my DJ years, have had like really rigorous stretches. I mean, if you look at my schedule, you know, 07, 08, 09, where I'm on an airplane 275 days a year, you know, where I'm playing every night and in a different city every night, and a lot of those days flying into Vegas to do a day party and then flying out that same night, flying back, doing another day party and flying out again. You start to learn that if you just keep it moving, your body gets acclimated to living like that, and two, it just makes things more smooth. You get rid of some of the
extras,
the extra stuff.
Yeah. It's like a muscle, but I also think that it's entirely mental.
Yeah, you have to be prepared for it. When I come back home, I mean, the reason I'm probably a social recluse during the week is I'm just unwinding and like trying to stay grounded. That was a problem early on in DJing, was how do you get grounded? How do you immerse yourself back? I don't want to equate it to like going to the Middle East as a military person coming back, but there is an element that's mental, you know. And I believe you know, there was an article in a British newspaper about the mental health of disc jockeys. Everybody thinks it's like a really fabulous lifestyle, but most of us are in a fetal position after work, you know what I mean?
Not just that, but performance anxiety is a real thing. And
it's a real thing.
It's experienced by more people than would care to probably.
You don't want to acknowledge it, and a lot of guys don't talk about it because you're like, I play records. What am I complaining? What are you complaining about, you know? But there's something to be said for just having a camaraderie where you can express it. The funny thing is, I was just talking about this a couple days ago. I hate talking about DJing with people who are not DJs because there's no subtle understanding, right? When I talk to you about DJing, you already know what I'm talking about. Even if it's not something you experience, there's like something that you can relate to. But you know, when you just bump into somebody like, so, you know, where are you going this weekend? I'm like, you know, I just don't want. why do I need to explain any of this
Right.
stuff?
It's because you kind of have to go into the micro so far down. Like you have to start, okay, well, this is what happens. And no, they don't pay me to do this, but yes, I get paid for that. And so it's like you kind of need somebody that's on the same wavelength. Like
the minutia. I don't want to explain the minutia.
Right, exactly.
And the good thing about your podcast, and I've listened to all the podcasts. They're interesting. Even though a lot of it's just stuff that I know.
Refreshers,
right?
maybe.
Refreshers, or like I've been in every situation, but what's interesting about it, and in hearing that 30,000 downloads is a lot. What's interesting about that is, I feel like if you're really interested in a creative endeavor, whether that's making music, writing movies, DJing, whatever, there's so many people who are not interested in any of the amino acids, right? And I always feel like if you're interested in something that much, won't you want to learn everything there is? Won't you want to have all the knowledge at hand to go do this thing? So a podcast like this would be beneficial not only to people who've been in it, been immersed, but also people who want to get into it. And it's accessible to people who are immersed in it, but also just curious. You know what I mean?
So I think that's part of the answer of how you stay relevant. It's because you continuously find ways to immerse yourself. Like you have to be in the space to live in the space.
I think you're correct in that. This is not. I mean, for some it's a hobby, right? But if you're doing it, it's not a hobby.
Right.
I mean, this is
like
it.
The majority, and even though you mentioned writing for movies and making music and DJing, which are all three things that you've done, or writing scripts or whatever the terminology you use.
We write scripts.
All things.
I sold a DJ movie to New Regency.
Did you?
The funny thing, if I could just have a tangent here.
Yeah, no, go for it.
When I had gone to UCLA for writing, they had told us, the people they bring to tell you about writing, the professional writers, they go, write what you know. That's where you're going to find the success. And I'm always like, they don't know what they're talking about. And then like the success that I've had in that business is, I wrote a DJ movie, right? And that's what gets bought. But I've corrected that because obviously there's movies about aliens and stuff, and that's not what you know. But I've curtailed write what you know to write what you know to be true, right? So if you find the in, you can tell any story with any world, with any type of characters, Well,
this is crazy, but wouldn't you be able to potentially take a DJ movie and just kind of shift it and make characters aliens? Like, you transpose things here and there?
Well, the thing about the DJ movie I wrote anyway, this is just a story of a person who rises to the occasion, who harnesses his skill set, right? And that's not specific to DJing, that's Rocky, right? I mean, there's only X amount of stories to be told, whatever components, whether it's a lumberjack or a race car driver or an alien, right? But I mean, I wrote that movie. I wrote an aspirational story. So it doesn't have to be about DJing. You can insert any character in there and tell that story,
Has there ever been a time where you wanted to stop?
Stop DJing?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think everybody gets burnt out. I mean, we've had this conversation before, I think there was a time where I was just so burnt out, and again, it's hard to have a top-down view of what's going on, where I just felt the music was bad.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, this is, you want to say it's killing you, but it's not. You're just playing records.
Right.
And
but it's a drain. It's definitely a drain on the psyche. If you're sitting in a space for 3 hours and you can't leave, and you're in charge of whether or not the night makes money, and you have to play X, Y, or Z records that you think are just garbage, and you have to make it be good. That can be soul-crushing labor sometimes if you're not okay with all of those things together.
It's okay to take a step back and reassess, and you can get reinvigorated. I don't think anybody quit DJing because of that, right? You find a way to make it work if you're really cut out to do this. So I just need to take a step back, and also it's not just DJing. You look at other components of your lifestyle. Maybe that's the issue too, So I think when I've sat there and gone, man, what is this? You have to find again what you love about it and then apply that.
Right. Find the spaces of happiness and latch onto those as hard as you can.
Man, I used to say, there is no happiness. There's just distraction from misery, And
that's interesting.
God, yeah. I mean,
what if it's the other way around? What if there is no misery, only distraction from happiness?
Well, you better make a lifestyle change, you know what I mean? Because that's not the way to live, right?
Have you encountered any openers that have been worthy of a tale for a podcast? Whether magnificent or terrible? Because I'll tell you, the first time I think we met was at Mokai in Miami, and I was opening up, and you like were the first out-of-town DJ to ever compliment me in a way where I was like, I guess I'm doing something right.
Yeah.
You were like, oh man, this is fantastic. I just want to hear you play all night. And to me, it was weird to have somebody from out of town that, in my eyes, was always coming into my city to
every other week
to prove a point.
Yeah.
And I didn't mind opening up. For me, it was fantastic to get to listen to different.
It was me and Five. We used to alternate the Mondays.
You guys, yeah.
And you were the opener. That's how.
Yeah. When you guys were there, I was the opener. When you weren't there, I was the headliner. Just for.
Which I mean, that works, you know.
Yeah.
A couple things. One, I'm a DJ, so I like good DJing, whether it's you or somebody else. And at that time when we met, I think there was a couple guys. And when me and Stone Rock used to do the blog, the Captain's Log, we profiled you. I was like, here's a dude that gets it. You know, there's so many people right now that don't get it. You get it. And I think we did Roche, and we did a couple of guys that we really were feeling what they were doing. They were like, they had their sea legs already, right? There's other guys too, but so that's probably why we connected. You know what I mean? Like, I like to, I like to be friends with people who get it too. You know, there's a lot of busters in nightlife.
In general, probably.
In general, of course, but but in terms of openers, and I've done tons of opening myself. Like when you're a resident in Las Vegas, they bring in guests. So when I had my residencies, for instance, at the Palms, on the Tuesdays, some Tuesdays they have a guest DJ, and some were amazing DJs that I was like excited to be we call it the doorman shift, open and close, right? Like a velvet rope, called the doorman shift. I was excited to do it, bring Jazzy Jeff through, or and then there's guys that I'm like, what are you guys doing? I'm going to try and resuscitate the room when this guy's done, and that's what it is. I'm sure you've seen it before, and I'm sure many DJs have seen it before. There's a skill to opening, to setting up the room. That's what you're doing. You're teeing up a room for someone to like hit a homer. So when I'm the guy coming in to do that, you come across a variety of opening DJs, and here's what they are. There is the opening DJ who doesn't know any better. He just started. He only knows the music from the last year, and that's what he's playing. You're like, hey, buddy, these are mine. These are mine. So there's that DJ who doesn't know any better, right? But there's the DJ who does know better, and he's sabotaging you.
Or trying to get some shine off.
There's the third one, the guy who thinks that he's trying to show you what he's got by like, yo, let me hit you with these songs. But in my head, I'm like, you showing me what you got is showing me you don't got a lot, man, because you're
doing my shtick.
It's a no-brainer. You're using the no-brainer records, right? At the wrong time. As I said before, it's not so much what you play, it's when you choose to play it to maximize the reaction. That's what it is. So, and then there's the openers who get it. And I think that openers who get it, opening it can be a really hard job, but it's not a hard job if you've been paying attention and you know what you're doing, and you have the musical knowledge, and you have the technical skill set to pull this off. So those really the four kind of openers that there are. There are DJs who will just sit there and, they'll cut the opener off. They're like, hey, man, they'll voice their opinion, right? Me and Stone Rock have always said, if we show up at a place and we're being burned, have them, buddy. There's 50 years of hit records to use.
Right.
If that's what you need, go with God.
Right.
And then we'll go from there.
Have you ever stepped in? Because I feel the same way. Not only do I feel like there's enough music where if you want to play the headlining set early, I'll just play the opening set a little later, right? That's one. And then two, I don't feel that anyone can play the records that are going to be played as well as I can, so I allow them to have that also. But have you ever stepped in? Because there are times where it's a very important night, and there might be a lot of things going on, and I don't want to say it's make or break in regards to future paychecks at this place, but it might reflect negatively on me if I go in and it's not as powerful as my check says it should be. Right? So have you ever stepped in? Because I have, and I've tapped people on the shoulder like, hey, don't play that, I'm going to play that later. Very infrequently, though, because again, revert to how I feel about it originally. But have you ever done that?
Two things. One, I never tapped someone and said, "You're off, I'm on," because you're messing up. I might do the subtle hint, like I got my laptop out, it's open, I've got my headphones on, and they're supposed to do that. But I'm a laid back dude. Everybody knows me, knows that I'm laid back, right? I just keep it moving. So, not there's anything wrong with saying, "Hey, man, you blew it, and I'm coming in." But I'm more subtle about it.
Right.
But I'll tell you a funny story. So Z-Trip used to work at the Palms at Rain, and he had let them know that there was X amount of DJs that he wanted to play with there, right? So I was one of them, and that room is a giant room. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been in there, but there's like fire-breathing apparatus on the ceiling. It's a crazy place, and so when we first started, I would do an opening set. But what was happening was when they open the doors, it's packed off the bat.
Right.
So we had to have a conversation. Well, the management's like, you can't be playing, opening stuff when the room's jammed like that. I totally agree. You can do your best. But they just wanted the DJs to come out of the gate swinging as soon as the doors were open. And granted, they're there to make money. It makes sense. So Z-Trip and I would have to have a conversation about what he was going to play for because it was a performance, what he was doing, right? Like, he wasn't winging it. He comes in and he has a specific thing that he does. And he also had to incorporate more current music into his set because the nature of the room. We had to have a conversation about what I was going to play and then what he was going to play, so we didn't step on each other's toes. And I remember one night, and this is Z-Trip, and this is someone who's like a very creative dude. I mean, and really lives DJing, like lives and breathes this. And I remember one night I was playing Kevin Rudolph, Let It Rock. And he comes up and goes, "Oh, man, I was going to play this." And I'm like, "Yo, what conversation are we having right now that you and me are having an argument over who's playing Let It Rock by Kevin Rudolph?" And we had a laugh about that. But that is a sign of the times, right? So in terms of... opening it. It's good. Like I said, I come in early.
Right.
It's good to have a dialogue with
I think not even a dialogue, but just your presence. If somebody was going to go off the rails and potentially try to get shine when you're not around, I feel like the second the headlining DJ steps in the room, the openers tend to get back in line a little bit, and it's because they obviously respect and they're catering to the crowd, but juggling the adoration of the potential headliner. So it's like, I want to do a good job, so they try their best to stay away from what you might play also.
Well, you hope that that's the case.
Right.
I mean, that's when you find seasoned openers. Again, and I don't even, I never even call them openers. Like, the guys that I talk with that are doing, quote unquote, the opening set, I say, "I'm playing with you tonight."
Right.
Because I'm not even trying to delineate between, I'm the headliner, you're the opener. We need to be on the same page. Like, the night needs to be a success. I say, "I'm playing with this guy tonight."
Fantastic.
Are you playing? Well, I get into town. Are you playing with me tonight? Because I'm not trying to put myself on some pedestal.
I agree, and I think that's a very important commentary piece, because I agree with you. I don't think that the only way that I would ever use opener and headliner is just so people understand.
If you're Tiesto, that's a headliner, right?
Okay. Right, but he still has to play with the guy that's playing first, so he's playing with that dude.
Absolutely.
Right.
You should be on the same page.
I think so. So when I say opener, when Graham says opener, or anytime in the future that you hear it on the podcast, I'm not in any way saying it in a demeaning fashion, because we are a team. We're working together. I'm the president, you're the vice president. You're just as important. If I ate some shitty food prior to the gig, if I have an emergency, if I pass out because performance anxiety got to me.
If you get yanked.
If I get yanked because I'm trash, if for whatever reason the club owner wants to hear things separate from what's in my computer, you're getting back on, which means if president's down, vice president takes over.
Yeah, man.
So you guys are just as important in the case of an emergency, or just in general if something goes askew inside
goes left, as they say.
Right, in the night space. So yeah, let's just clearly mark that openers are just as important as the headliners. And actually, something that I thought about, it's ironic because the best opener is a headliner, but it's because they have so much time and experience in the space that they know exactly how to lob those pitches for that next person, just crack them out of the arena. I really enjoy opening.
Me too. It's a blast, man. It really is. You get to like kind of flex a little bit harder.
Yeah.
In my opinion, you know. So I've always enjoyed the opening set, you know. But you know, a lot of people don't want to do that. They think it's a
grunt work.
But it's not. You know,
it's not. Anytime that it's like comedians. You know, there's a lot of parallels between comedy and DJing. Anytime that you're available to get on stage and have time in front of people, that's when you can start sharpening your knives up. So even if you're just quote unquote opening or playing not the top hits of the moment, you're sharpening knives at that point, and take the most that you can from that little bit of time or that allotted time to make yourself a better DJ in general.
Well, just want to take a minute to shout out Louis Rich, the most mysterious man in show business, who's sitting in the room here, eavesdropping.
He said, I asked him to be on the podcast, and he said, not till you have somebody big on it. So,
and here he is.
So now he has no excuse.
He was just making sure I'm not disparaging him.
So, speaking of management companies, you've kind of like run every single profession that is in entertainment in regards to music at this point. And one time you had your own DJ management or DJ booking. Yeah. What was it, Koi Pond? Captains of Industry?
It was the original Captains of Industry, and it wasn't. We didn't set out to manage DJs, right?
You filled a void in a space that was necessary, though.
Yeah, we had Stone Rock and I had a lot of work and we couldn't handle it. And at that time, there was really no managers around. You know, like as we know it now.
Right.
So we took on a bunch of guys that we believed in, that were really great DJs, and we would farm the work out. And we had developed, and this has been used many, many times since, but early on, we had developed this idea of branding a night, right? Prior to Captains of Industry, the Koi Pond, there was the Abe Froman Showman, which was me, Stone, Five, Obi-Wan, Vice, and DJ Cobra. And
so before you go on, the origin of the name, please.
Abe Froman Showman?
Right.
Abe Froman is obviously the Sausage King of Chicago, as referenced in Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Okay. So this is because you have to understand that even me, one day I was watching Ferris Bueller not so long ago, and I was like, oh. Shit. So for a lot of younger books that might listen to this, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, there's a reference where one of the actors mentions something or other to get a reservation at a restaurant.
That's how he gets the table, yes.
A table at a restaurant. So he says he is the Sausage King of Chicago.
Yes.
And his name is Abe Froman.
Showman. The Abe Froman Showman.
Okay. And that's what you decided to name the night that you guys would...
Yeah, so we would, basically what we were doing back then, and a lot of people weren't traveling at that time, right? We're talking about, this is 05, 06. This is a long time ago. We would go to a nightclub.
Long time.
In terms of DJing. Right. Find a club in a city, Kansas City, for instance, that had an awesome club called Blonde. And their Sunday nights, you know, they would sell tables. It was a bottle club. I mean, just to take one step back, the clubs back then that were forward thinking, they know that you have a small market that's not a nightlife, quote unquote, market per se. The people who live in that city are probably saving up all year for their annual Vegas trip to have the experience. So some smart club owners would say, what if we import the Vegas experience here and then we can take your money every week? Velvet Rope, marquee, quote unquote, DJs, you know, name DJs, doorman, bottle service, the whole thing. This is a pretty foreign concept to a lot of cities. Even to this day, you have cities that are major U.S. cities that don't have even this, right? But so, you know, going back some years, some clubs were like, yeah, let's do this. There's sports teams there. There's people to spend money. So this is where we started to find nightclubs where we could go, and there was it was worth our while in terms of money, right?
How did you find them?
The network was smaller back then, and then with the help of, I don't even remember how we started with Blonde, using Blonde as an example. But we also worked with some agents at APA back then that had contacts. So we just kind of like
started. What is APA?
There's a entertainment agency,
Okay.
a pretty big one here that doesn't deal with DJs really. I mean, they have a music department, huge music department.
So potentially, if there was a concert and they needed a quote unquote after party somewhere,
they did that, and then they would do that with guys that were affiliated with the groups. But I mean, if anybody looked up APA, you'd see that they not manage, but they're agents for huge directors, huge actors, huge writers, and huge musicians, right? So they have a relationship with Harrah's corporate, for instance, right? There's venues.
Right.
So they could send us in and say, hey, we have these DJs. So that was one aspect. The other aspect was just networking and finding the clubs, or they find us, right? As soon as you were in Vegas, especially back then, that's what you could sell, So anyways, we started going Blonde, using Blonde as the example again. And, shout out to all those dudes. But Sundays became Abe Froman Sundays. So what you get is you settle on the fee, and you get one of us every week flying in to do it.
Just one of you?
Yes.
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah, but so what they're selling, what we're selling, and then they're consequently selling their crowd is
Vegas here.
They get one of us, and all of us are good. So, I mean, you're going to have a different night every Sunday, but it's a good night every Sunday.
That sounds familiar. Right? It's kind of like something that we have going on now.
I totally agree. I mean, if you want to get down that rabbit hole.
No, I don't. Not yet.
But, so that's where it came from. But eventually, the Abe Froman Showman broke up.
Do you remember what the rates were like? And if you do, would you care to share them? Because I don't want to know for any other sake beyond curiosity.
Let me just say this. And this is relevant now too. You have to charge what is. You can't go to a market and just say I need X, right? You have to look at what the market is. If they're selling $2 Budweisers all night, you can't sit there and it's relative to the market.
I agree, and
right?
I love the pause that you took to make it a completely diplomatic answer. But you're absolutely right. You can't go into just a town where they have horse ranches and farming and say, well, here's a mega club, it's $1,000 per bottle.
Right.
It's like, well, those people are like salt of the earth, hardworking people that prefer a $2 Budweiser to your $1,000 bottle.
Right. So
that business is going to fail.
You got to be aware of that. So it's going to change market to market. Mm-hmm. But
so let me ask it this way. Are they similar to today's rates?
Some of them, yes. Okay. Some of them, no. And that's
higher or lower, or both?
Both, and some remain the same. I mean, I don't even remember what it was back then, but I mean, it was worth our while. But the reason rates change are, I mean, that's a whole other sociological and anthropological discussion. But it comes down to the industry change. There's more DJs. There's more clubs. There's maybe less money. I mean, when I say less money, I say if you have a nightclub that has budgeted X amount of dollars for the year, and that we're living in an era where there is a hard ticket sale, and I don't know if the listeners don't know what a hard ticket sale is. Open format DJs are not hard ticket sales. Tiesto is a hard ticket sale, meaning it costs this much to go see Tiesto. Open format guys are soft ticket sales where people come to the club because they know that club is hiring a good DJ and they're going to have a good time, right? If a nightclub has budgeted X amount of dollars for the year, for their entertainment budget, DJ budget, and now you're going to bring on a hard ticket sale, suddenly a large slice of that pie has suddenly gone to the one guy. So whereas in before quote unquote EDM bubble or hard ticket DJs, you might 52 weeks chopping up that pie with open format DJs suddenly becomes, you're chopping up 2/3 of the pie, or you're chopping up half the pie now. So there's many reasons why the money goes down.
Right.
There's nothing you can do about it,
This is,
my accountant always asks about this.
Yeah. How come they pay you here and they pay you that there?
Yeah.
I think this is like an aside, and I'm very glad that we both have such great representation in the space where we work.
Yeah, sure.
But and I'm not saying that just because he's in the room, but there's a lot of times where I look at what I get to do for a living, and I'm like, I would come here for a pack of Skittles and a plane ticket, right? So I'm glad that there's somebody that's fighting for me for a fair market value, whatever that might be in the space that we're going to work at. There was a conversation that a DJ buddy of mine had with, obviously I'm not going to name names, but the booker for the club was like, I'm booking this artist because it's going to sell tickets.
And being in the space for as long as I have, I know that that act would not have sold tickets, and it didn't do well. But what I would have loved to have a conversation with that dude is what I'll tell you now, when we can kind of bounce it around. We are not hard ticket sellers, as you mentioned, but we are the people that create the atmosphere, create
No doubt.
the
I
energy.
was not in any way diminishing.
Right, disparaging, right. But so like you said what we're not, I want to say what I think we are. And then you can tell me if you think it's on point or not. So creating the vibe and the energy, and we're basically the best lemon squeezers in the game.
No doubt.
So if somebody walks in with $100 in their pocket and they're kind of like, I have school early tomorrow, should I spend this $100 on the next couple of drinks or not? We're the dudes that make that decision a lot easier.
I agree.
And if they are potentially at the limit of the amount of money that they had to spend to get that table, and they are asked, do you want one more? And we're that little sprinkle of yes that gets put over the whole dance floor and the entire club.
I totally agree with you.
Okay.
I totally agree with you. I'll say this. Two things. We're a stone's throw from Beverly High right now, where DJ AM went, right? And a lot of other people who went into hip hop. But you taking AM as an example, when he was at the height of his popularity and they were paying him $20,000 a night, which, without context, that sounds like nothing today, right? But at the time, this is crazy.
It's first time, right?
I would go to club after club that breaks even on the deal. They bring him in, they pay him whatever they pay him, and they break even on the deal, but they did it for the look. Mm-hmm. They wanted to be the club that brings AM in, right? So there's something to be said for clubs that want that. They're bringing in the big performer, big DJ, big whoever for the look, and it has nothing to do with
making
the money, right? And that's fine. The flip side of that is once the glitter is off that component, right? That distraction, what's happening in the nightclub, right? So yeah, you might sell a lot of tickets coming up, but is the rest of the room suffering because of it? And what's more important to you? So like bringing in like yourself into a room where you're going to do a solid job and you're going to maximize the profit share at the end of the night, like making sure that, it's a successful night. Which one becomes more important to the nightclub? Like having the look because they brought in X celebrity who doesn't really know anything about DJing and it sucks, but it brought in a lot of people to sit there and stare at him or her up in the DJ booth, or having the guy who's just like, man, that was solid front to back. We killed it, made good money. The tables were sold out. They kept buying bottles.
I think it's a balance of both.
Of course.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be the same every week.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I think what happened throughout the last couple of years is it got loaded way heavy on the quote unquote hard ticket look at me DJs.
Yeah.
And
hosts. Table hosts take a picture with this person from some reality show. It's crazy.
Right, and they're getting $25,000
just for a
nuts. Walkthrough. So I think that the balance is going to shift back over. Unfortunately for you, because you're going to have to do this for like another 10 or 15 years. But
what if I can become a celebrity? What are we talking about?
Maybe you could do that too.
Just as an aside, I've been waiting for the DJ who becomes a celebrity, who like you hire him and he goes and wrecks it, like he kills it, right?
Like does a good job.
There's never been the DJ who's
AM.
Without AM was lightning in a bottle, there's a lot of elements for why he was successful. But yeah, you take him as a celebrity at face value, he goes in and he kills it, right? And that was his secret. So there've been many contestants for that same slot, but they don't do that job in the booth,
right? And
that's why they've never been there.
Right. Well, we'll talk about a formula for me afterwards. So what I think is going to eventually happen is, as you know, cycles, markets change, things come back. It's like a boomerang effect. So we went really far to the let's pay the hard ticket sellers a bunch of money and then have the grinders suffer. So they would have, whatever the budget was for the month, the 90% of it allocated to that big act, and then 10% for every other Friday and Saturday night, which is, I think, unsustainable in the grand scheme of business in regards to nightlife. What I think is going to end up happening is what used to happen is that maybe every quarter or every other month you have that one big act, and then the rest of the month you put in supreme talent that can hold it. So you take that big push from from the marketing of that act, whatever it might be, whether it be a host or a big DJ. You take that big push, and then you have a great week 1, and then week 2 is also solid, and then week 3 is also solid, so you don't suffer. So then when you bring that next big act, you're still riding the wave from the first one,
right? Because
the quote-unquote grinders, people like you and me, have been able to keep the club up through that time frame.
Sure.
So you're not paying, and this is not to disparage new DJs, but you might not be ready for it. You're not paying a new DJ $100 for a Friday and a Saturday, where he's just making it a terrible night for everybody. And then people have to be like, well, you know what, I'm just going to wait until this other big act comes through again, because it's not good unless there's a big act there. That's the problem.
Well, I equate it to making movies, always, like this, what you're talking about. So you can take a movie like Noah, right? The Russell Crowe movie. It costs $300 million to make, but it makes $350 million. So you've made $50 million. But then you take Get Out, that costs $5 million to make, and it makes $250 million. And it comes down to profit margin, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing for a DJ. You can have the biggest club who's going to spend $400,000 on the DJ, and they might make $1 million that night. Or you go to the club that spent $2,000 on the DJ, and they make $100,000 a night. Mm-hmm. It's a profit margin thing, right?
Right. So the percentage is different from like the final amount. This is something that like I've racked my brain about for a while, and I'm like, I don't understand why, but it kind of makes sense. But I think what happens is there's a rate of diminishing returns, not just from the star value, but the amount of people that go to Vegas to see, let's say, something away from us, Elton John.
Yeah.
You know, there's no Vegas residency that lasts forever. And there's good reason for that, because once enough people that want to see it have seen it, they're like, what else you got?
Well, also, if you're offering a DJ who's playing like consecutively week to week, mm-hmm. it's easier to be like, I'll just do it next week. You're cutting the legs off the demand.
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. And maybe you never get around to it, seeing it, because you just keep putting it off. But if you know you have a window, or this guy plays 4 times a year or whatever, you know you got to plan for that. And I mean, nightclubs aren't dumb, or the people who run it aren't dumb. They know this, but there's a lot of moving parts.
Right.
So some stuff falls through the cracks, you know?
It's crazy to me, and I'm sure that you witnessing this firsthand. I was a little bit late, and I always think to myself, what would have happened if my home market was in Miami, on this peninsula far away from the rest of the world,
as far south as you can get.
I always think to myself, like, shit, if I had been a little bit closer to the action, maybe my career path would have been slightly different. But I'm still happy with
Miami is a huge nightlife market.
It is, and I got lucky to ride that last wave before like it kind of crashed on the sand now, and it's still a great place to party.
Right.
But I think that again, things cycle, and there's a counterculture to the velvet rope. And people are like, wait, you want to charge me how much? Like, fuck you, I'm going to Wynwood to get a beer.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, and that's where the podcast will end today. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate all of the ears out there that tune into this week in and week out. The podcast is growing exponentially. I just looked up the numbers of the one that I dropped on Friday, which was just my idea of an opening mix, something that I would enjoy doing at a nightclub where I would be opening, and it's the best performing podcast of the first week, rather. The first week, how can I word this? It's the best performing podcast as rated by the first week it's out. That would be the easiest way for me to say it. And considering that's the case, I guess I'm going to make another one. I actually had a conversation with someone on Twitter, a DJ, that said, I don't understand this mix, because if I did this at the clubs that I open at, I would be fired. And the answer to that is, well, then don't do that at the clubs where you work at, right? I think the general expectation was that I would put out a mix to help guide people in their specific markets or their specific nightclubs as to what they should be doing. And I'm not really going to do that, because that's part of the fun. And that's what you guys need to figure out on your own, obviously, right? The DJs, you got to figure out what's best for the club you're playing at on the night you're playing. But I kind of understand what he was saying, because the way that I opened is very, very, very unique in regards to what goes on in clubs these days. And the DJ said, well, what if people hear that and think that's how they're supposed to open? Well, fucking fantastic then. Then let them open that way, because that's just like cool, hip, good music that I think would work well in the first hour of any nightclub, regardless of what kind of crowd is going there. Now, if it's like an all hip-hop nightclub, obviously you can't do that. So considering that podcast did so well the first week, I am going to record another opening mix that I'll put together, and I'll make it more, what would be a good term for this? So I won't play music that I think is dope for opening sets. I'll play more, so I don't want to do a high energy EDM like opening set, like, because that would just, I'd be bored, honestly. I would just sit here and just like wait for the records to end and just be bored out of my mind, because the whole point of playing quote unquote high energy music is specifically to get back some from the crowd as I'm playing it, and just sitting here in my studio doing that, I'd just be bored. So the next best thing would be kind of like a hip hop open format opening up. And I already know what I'm going to do, obviously, but I have an idea for the mix, and I'm going to put that together and release it sometime soon. Look for that. I appreciate the amount of people that listened to that opening mix that I put out. Jesus, at this point, I feel kind of embarrassed that there was a little bit of sloppiness in there. But the thing is, that mix was one take. I just hit record and I just went. It wasn't like some of my other mixes that you guys might have heard on Club Killers or DJ City or in other areas of content. Those mixes that you hear are very produced, and I take my time with them, and I ensure that every little piece is perfect, or as perfect as I want it to be. But this mix was a one take, so that's, I guess, the bar of how good a DJ is how good a one take mix can be. And even though I'm happy with it, there are some pieces that are a little sloppy and I would want to redo, but that's just what it is. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at is thank you guys for listening to this podcast and the podcast that I put out about the opening mix. Considering how well it did, I'm going to make another one. And I appreciate you guys for listening. Tune in to part 2 of Graham's episode, which will be released maybe at the end of this week, maybe at the beginning of next week. As always, email your questions, myfavoritepodcast@gmail.com. I'll catch you guys later.